I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network, and here today with me is Doug Casey of internationalman.com. Thank you so much for being here today, Doug.
It's nice to talk to you from the pampas of Uruguay, or actually the beach in Uruguay, which is actually where I am.
Great. It is very nice to be speaking with you as well. I think the best place for us to start today is you've often spoken in the past about a coming Greater Depression. Is that what the coronavirus has kicked off? Is that where we're at right now? Can you tell me your thoughts on that, please?
Right. Look, we have to define the word depression. Best broad general definition is it's a period of time when most people's standard of living goes down significantly. Well, that's certainly happening. So we can say that it started, but when I was talking about predicting a depression, it's as a consequence of distortions cranked into the economy by taxes and regulations and inflation primarily. But since there's no way of telling how big a bubble can be blown up or how tall a tree can grow, any depression with financial causes, which this one has, needs some type of an incident, a catalyst to set it off. Now, the Depression of 1929 to 1946, the catalyst for that was, most people were unaware of this, it wasn't really so much the collapse of the market in October of 1929 as the failure of an Austrian bank, which then created a daisy chain. One bank fails and its debts to the next bank are defaulted on, and its debts to the next bank. And it becomes like a bunch of dominoes. So this virus hysteria, I don't call it a pandemic, it's a hysteria. Actually, not really much more serious than the normal annual flu, which typically kills, it varies, because viruses mutate. The normal seasonal flu generally kills 30,000 to 60 or 70,000 Americans every year. Passes without any comment. So this one's done more, but it's the government's reaction to this virus and the public's hysteria that's acted as the pin that's broke the bubble. And actually it's more than a pin, as the sledgehammer that's broken the bubble. So that's where we are right now. And we're not going to have a V-shaped recovery. We're going to have, we're actually having, somebody's described it as a K-shaped recovery. And we're not going to really have a recovery, incidentally, where most people go downhill, that thing on a K, but the ultra rich are getting richer. So this is actually the worst of all possible worlds that we're looking at right now. I've long said when the depression comes, it's going to be worse than even I think it's going to be. And I think it's turning out that way.
Speaking about governments and how they've handled COVID-19, what do you think about what they've done? Are there any governments you think have handled it well?
No, the average government everywhere in the world is about as intelligent and efficient as your local Department of Motor Vehicles. And the way they've handled this virus hysteria, the virus itself, as I said, is relatively trivial, has been exceptionally incompetent because they've created, and they've aggravated, they've accelerated the hysteria that the media has put on and locking down things. I mean, there are going to be millions of people that have permanently lost their jobs, and they're probably not going to get them back. They're going to have to find something else to do. So it couldn't really be much worse. What I suggest the governments have done, I think Sweden comes as close to having done it right as any country. Yes, there are risks. If you're elderly and fat or sick or have comorbidities of various types, yeah, stay inside, don't socialize with people, because it attacks old, sick people. Well, like all diseases, attack old, sick people more than anybody else. That's no cosmic breakthrough. So the old people, sick people should isolate themselves. That's just common sense and intelligence when anything's going around. But young people are about 1,000 times less likely to get it as old people. And if you get it, as Donald Trump has recently shown, you'll recover from it, and then you're immune. So this is all crazy hysteria, is what it's all about. And yes, the governments have handled it extremely stupidly. And what are the consequences? But they love it because it's shown this is a superb way to control the people in your country. If you scare them with the so-called deadly disease, and of course things like tuberculosis and 100 other diseases that are communicable are much more deadly and much more widespread. Forget about that though. This is the bête noire of the day. Now you've got extra regulation, an extra agency to set up to protect the people from extra testing. It's a nightmare, but the kind of people that go into governments love this type of thing. It makes it easier for them to control the populace. So I guess that kind of sums up my view on this.
Okay, now one thing I've been asking people is what the consequences of these global efforts could be. In other words, how will governments and countries around the world emerge after COVID-19? And you've gone into that a little bit, but I wondered if you could hone in a little bit more, dig deeper on what does the world look like after that happens?
Well, in the case of the United States, this hysteria surrounding the virus is inconveniently, and it's very timely from some people's point of view, because the election is coming up in a month. And consequences of that, this election is going to be the most important election in American history, with the possible exception of that of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. And you know what happened after Lincoln was elected. The next step was a civil war. And certainly in the United States, the people in the red counties and blue counties, so-called, actually hate each other. I mean, it's no longer a question of a polite political discussion about differing views. It's visceral. These people just really hate each other. If they're members of the same family, you can forget about Thanksgiving dinner or whatnot, which is illegal in a lot of places now because you can't have more than a few people together, even if they're family members. So this is really serious, what's coming up. I'd say, and actually there are some people that are actually talking about this in the establishment, which is rather shocking. I've talked about it for over a year, actually, possibility of a civil war. But Americans are, too fat, too addled with psychiatric drugs to think about an actual civil war. I mean, half the country's living in their basement playing video games and hiding from the virus hysteria. So what we really need in the US at this point is secession, where places like California and Oregon and Washington and some places some counties on the East Coast simply secede. I mean, why do we all have to be part of the same country following the same rules? Because if Biden wins and the Democrats, who are all just radical, if you watch those 20 people that wanted to be wanted to be the presidential candidate for the Democrats, if you watch them on television, I mean, most of them were actually borderline insane, hardline socialists, really communists. So you don't want to live in a country where people like that are making the laws. And a lot of the people that are supporting Trump Uh, Look, this is going to get really serious and it could get bloody. It doesn't matter who wins, the Democrats or the Republicans. The other side won't accept the election, and it could get really quite ugly. Everything that said, even though Trump has made a lot of huge economic mistakes, like wanting to print up trillions of dollars to bail out the economy, which is just going to make the depression worse, crank in more distortions and misallocations of capital. I got to say that I generally support the Donald because at least he's a cultural conservative. He doesn't want to overthrow the whole basis of the United States, which many of these crazy Democrats actually want to do. So I'd rather have 4 years of street fighting than go right into a Sovietized America immediately. This is bad news. That's why I said this depression's going to be worse than I thought it's going to be, because it's going to have a serious political element in addition to an economic and financial element and sociological disturbances. So I've told people for years that they've got to diversify internationally. So if things get wild and woolly in your home country, well, you can go someplace else while people fight it out with each other. And it could get that serious. So the answer to the
Okay,
question
yeah.
is, yes, these governments are doing the wrong thing and they're aggravating it. But hopefully it'll make people want to disavow the idea of being a busybody and supporting our idiots over their idiots. They'll see that the whole ridiculous political game is not worthy of a civilized person.
Okay, so you've given us, I think, a good idea of what's going on in the world, what's going on, especially in the US as we approach the presidential election. I think obviously for our audience, one thing that we've seen this year as these changes take place is that gold has really been thriving, although it's pulled back a little bit in the last couple of weeks. In your mind, what's the outlook for gold against this backdrop and perhaps gold stocks as a group as well?
Well, gold has done well indeed, and I think it's going to do better, among other things, because the Federal Reserve the US government is running totally unfinanceable deficits of trillions, trillions. Forget about millions or billions or hundreds of billions. The government is running trillions of dollars of deficits, and they're all being financed by the Federal Reserve by printing money. So that's why we're having the stock market, bull market right now. You throw trillions of dollars at it, people will buy stocks. They want to get out of dollars. But gold is going to profit much more even than stocks do. So it's high now. It's not at giveaway levels. But as people get scared, it's going higher. So I remain a gold bull. And I don't plan on selling my gold until I see either Slime or Newspeak, should those magazines still exist in a few years, until I see one or both of them running a front cover of a golden bear tearing apart the New York Stock Exchange. At that point, I've never sold an ounce of gold so far that I've bought in cash. I'll sell all my gold, sell all my gold stocks, and buy something like Berkshire Hathaway. But that's down the road. Right now, you want to own gold and own gold mining stocks, because I think the next bubble created by all this money, we've had a marijuana bubble, we've had a cryptocurrency bubble, we've had a real estate bubble, we've had a high-tech bubble, two of them actually, one in 2000 and one today. The next one is going to be in gold and gold stocks. And since gold stocks are such a teeny weeny, they're not small cap, they're not micro cap, they're nano cap. Some of them are pico cap. When the public gets the bit in its teeth and we have a gold bubble, which we will, it's going to be like trying to funnel the contents of Hoover Dam through a garden hose. It's going to be explosive. Now, anything can happen, but basically I'm all in on gold and gold mining stocks right now.
Okay, so that raises a question for me. If we're in a situation where perhaps a rising tide will raise all boats, how picky should investors be when they're thinking about which gold stocks to invest in? Obviously, it's better to do your due diligence and choose a good company. But in the situation, what do you do? Do you do that, or do you just go for whatever sounds best to you?
Well, there are about 2,000 public companies in the world that purport to be in the gold business. And they range from majors like Newmont and Barrick to exploration companies, which are one step up from a guy with a mule wandering around in the desert. So it's a pretty wide range. And I would say 90%, probably more, probably closer to 95% of those 2,000 companies are just really, they're gambles. Not even, I would hardly even call them speculations. They're gambles. Most of those are just crap that you shouldn't own. They're promotions. The only winners are going to be the insiders that paper themselves up at a penny a share and offload it to the public at much more during the coming mania. What should you buy now? Look, there are quality small gold mining companies run by really good, serially successful people that are geologists and mining engineers. That's the kind of stuff you should buy. You can just buy Newmont and Barrick and you're going to do fine. You're going to make a lot of money. But better to buy the next tier down, smaller, leveraged, growing. I mean, I could name names, but that's kind of pointless, because when you tout a stock without giving all the real reasons in detail and putting it in context, you're just asking for trouble, both for everybody. So I'd say you've got to do some real research and don't get taken in by what the promoters say. But you know, it's such a specialized area. To properly invest in gold mining stocks, you really should know something about geology. You should know something about mining engineering, something about metallurgy. You got to look at the politics of the area where it's located. You got to check out the character of the people running the company. The people are more important than everything else put together. You got to see how the company's financed. You got to see how much paper is out there. I mean, it's not really simple, but you can do it. And I suggest at this time, it's worth spending the time to learn a few things about it before you buy these things. Because when these gold stocks, smaller gold stocks run, they can go 10 to 1 easy. Some of them go 100 to 1. I've personally owned gold stocks that have gone 1,000 to 1 that I personally owned from bottom to top. Got lucky within just one gold cycle. So this is the place to be, assuming I'm right about gold. I think I am.
What else should investors be looking at right now? Assuming you've got your gold, you've put money in some gold stocks. You mentioned diversifying internationally. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, or any other areas, possible upcoming bubbles that people might want to keep an eye on.
Well, I've written a lot about Bitcoin. I was a late adopter to it, but it's been very good to me. And I think Bitcoin is another place you ought to be, because we're going to get foreign exchange controls of some type in the US as the monetary situation gets completely out of control. The government never controls itself, it controls its subjects. So we will get some kind of foreign exchange controls. And the only way around them would be with Bitcoin. So I think there's going to be a lot more buyers coming into Bitcoin in the future. I think that ought to be part of your portfolio. I think you should definitely be diversified internationally, because if things get wild and woolly in the US, I'd rather watch it all on my widescreen from a safe location, quiet, peaceful, pleasant location, like I am now, as opposed to watch it out my front window. So you should, if you're in a position to do so, diversify internationally, because your as big as your financial risks are, your political risks are even bigger. So diversify internationally if you can. And the worst place for your money today is the bond market, triple threat to your capital, interest rates, default risk, currency risk, all three huge risks. Bonds, no point in owning bonds today. Stocks are really sketchy. They'll go up if they print more money, but I don't want to play that game. So I don't know. Hold on to your hat. This is going to be a wild ride, probably for the rest of the decade. Don't forget, the last depression lasted from 1929 to 1946, and governments weren't nearly as powerful then as they are now.
As we're finishing up, I want to ask, I think a lot of the time when people listen to you, they feel like, oh no, he's being very pessimistic. But usually you leave us with some hope of, yes, we can get out of this. If you do particular things, you have a better chance of being okay. How are you feeling about that at this point in time?
Well, you're absolutely right, Charlotte. For one thing, I think Ray Kurzweil is absolutely spot on with his projection of the singularity, which is also the title of a book he wrote, which I recommend everybody read, that in 20 years, with advances in technology in a number of areas, it's moving faster than Moore's law at this point. So 20 years from now, this will just be an unpleasant memory, what's going on in the next 10 years. The world is going to be transformed for the better, I hope. So, that's on the bright side. Just make sure that you are in a financial and economic position to take advantage of it 20 years from now when it happens, more or less. So that's one thing to consider. Listen, even during the Depression, even if we have something resembling World War III, which is not unlikely, incidentally, for lots of reasons, but that's a whole different subject, most of the real wealth in the world will still exist. It's just going to change ownership. So hopefully you'll get your share and not wind up, cadging for roots and berries under a bridge someplace. I know you won't, but some people will, so they'll make really serious mistakes. So it doesn't have to be that way. So, look, we've had, what Gilda Radner said on Saturday Night Live before she died, her Rosanna Dana character. She said, if it's not one thing, it's something else. It's always something. And this has been the case through 5,000 years of recorded history. So don't worry about it too much. Just watch the passing parade and try to enjoy it.
Okay, well, thank you for that perspective. Finally, I want to ask you what you have going on right now, any projects that you're working on that you could share with us.
Oh, thanks. I almost forgot. I have since I sold Casey Research several years ago, I have a blog, which is really quite a good blog. Everybody ought to go to internationalman.com and they'll find it quite worthwhile. Lots of good information. And I do a piece there once a week also. So go to internationalman.com. I've just started with my friend Matt Smith a daily video blog where I rap about different subjects for half an hour, even an hour. Just started that, so you can go on YouTube and Google Doug Casey, Matt Smith. I don't know what we call the thing, but that's quite interesting. I do urge people to get these novels that writing. This is the first one about the gold mining business and a bush war in Africa. It's quite good. And next week, we're coming out with Assassin, the third in the series, where as our hero goes through different politically incorrect occupations. Speculator, drug lord is the second one. Now he's an assassin. And then things get more radical and wild and crazy from there. But this next book that's coming out will be on Amazon in a week, Assassin. And I promise you're in for a good read. So that's what I've been doing. And other than that, just trying to get to the gym a couple times a week and play it cool.
Okay, well, I think that sounds like a good place to wrap it up. I hope that everybody will check out your blog and your new book coming out. Thank you so much for being here with me today online. It was great to talk
Well,
to you.
thanks, Charlotte. We'll talk again in 6 months or a year or whenever and see if I was right or wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network, and this is Doug Casey.